Breaking news this Friday morning. 2 days of trade talks between Washington and Beijing are now over. The U.S. delegation is set to meet with the Chinese President Xi Jinping later today. Now, the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, calling the talks productive. Despite no signs of real progress, there's also been no decision yet on extending President Trump's March 1st deadline for higher tariffs, but the White House says it is optimistic.
They're covering all the ground. They're hard at it. They are going to meet with President Xi, so that's a very good sign. And they're just soldiering on. So, I like that story, and I will stay with the phrase, the vibe is good.
The vibe is good. Well, is it? Tori Whiting, a trade economist at the Heritage Foundation, joins us now. Good morning, Tori.
Good morning.
So after all these days of trade talks, are we closer to a deal or further from one?
Well, I think what's most important here is that the two sides are still talking. The U.S. and China negotiations are still ongoing, and that's a good thing. And, seeing that the administration is open to extending that March 1st deadline is also positive, because we can't rush these things. These are big structural reforms we're asking China to make, and that takes time.
Where are the sharp differences, Tori?
The sharp differences between the two sides, I'd say that, the U.S. really wants to see substantial structural changes, and China is wanting to slow walk that like they always do.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that China is seeking to woo the U.S. with the promise of big semiconductor, big chip purchases, generated in part, and this is interesting, by moving assembly operations of where we make the semiconductors, let's say Mexico, for instance, to China. So if that's the case, if that's the maneuver that they're working on, doesn't that only benefit China in the end? Would we ever agree to that?
Well, I think that nothing is really off the table right now, and what we really need to be focusing on, though, is not, these maneuvering trade flows, but it's really the real issues. It's investment, it's tech transfer, it's intellectual property rights, and we need to make sure the administration is staying on course with making sure those are the main issues.
Yeah, the follow-through is also a big issue. It also seems China is willing to budge on this one issue, eliminating a national program that gives Chinese drivers subsidies to buy cars made in China. Do you see any budging on that point to open up their markets to foreign competition?
Well, I think it still remains to be seen until we see some sort of announcement from the two sides. But I think the most important thing here is really that any deal needs to include a removal of the tariffs that have been imposed thus far. They have been over $250 billion worth of imports in the United States are more expensive today than they were a year ago. And we need to make sure that these new taxes are not the new normal.
All right. And those taxes, a.k.a. tariffs, might go up again March 1st. And a lot of folks are saying the president should increase the tariffs, even if we don't have a deal, to keep the pressure on China. Tori, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.